This video is brought to you by America First Insight. Help support the growing conservative movement by becoming a member today. And if you want to support this channel, you can also use the code REAL when becoming a member. Thank you and enjoy the video. As everybody knows, we are getting closer to the 2026 midterm elections, and with that, we're starting to get more and more polling surrounding several critical Senate races, including North Carolina, which I would argue might be the best indicator for how 2026 will go. And I should be clear about this. This is not an official prediction. I'm not saying that Roy Cooper or Michael Whatley is going to win by 15 points or whatever. But the point is, I do think we have to talk about North Carolina because, like I said, I really believe North Carolina in 2026 will tell us a lot about the environment. Because theoretically, of all the Senate seats the Democrats have a chance of flipping, you look at the map right here, you would think with them running Roy Cooper, who is allegedly this super popular, beloved Democrat governor, not from 20 years ago, from what, 3 years ago? He was there for 8 years, was the attorney general before that, very popular, and supposedly he's this electoral juggernaut that's going to win by 25 points or whatever, versus Michael Whatley, who, yeah, some people know who he is. He is a former RNC chair. He did a very good job in 2024. Before that, he was the chair of the North Carolina GOP. So yeah, some people know who he is, but really, he doesn't have any electoral experience. Not really. With that in mind, you would expect Democrats to have a very good night in North Carolina because, again, Democrats have a very strong candidate, longtime governor of the state, before that attorney general. Michael Whatley really isn't known. And with it being a blue wave, allegedly, you would think Democrats would have a very easy time at flipping North Carolina. And I would argue North Carolina kind of is the bellwether for 26. I'm not saying that means that Whatley's going to win. It just means if Democrats win North Carolina by a big margin, yeah, they're probably having a very good night across the board. But at the same time, if they underperform here, and they may still win it by a point or two, but in that scenario, would you really call that a huge victory? Yeah, they flipped North Carolina, a state that Trump won in 2024 by what? 3 points? Yeah, it is a Republican leaning state, and flipping it is nice, but with everything going the Democrats' way, theoretically, with Roy Cooper running against a relatively speaking unknown candidate, if you win by only 1 or 2 points, that's not a good sign for Democrats. North Carolina should be a state that you win by a big margin. If you don't, do you think you're in a good position to win a place like Ohio, Iowa, even Texas or Florida, these more Republican states? That's the issue that some people are not really accounting for. Democrats, if they have a good night, they need to run it up in a place like North Carolina to show that, yeah, they are having a wave year, not just isolated in some very Democrat states like, I don't know, New York or California or whatever. North Carolina, in my opinion, is that bellwether kind of. So that's why it's important. It's very important to see how the national environment is really going. Well, there's been some recent polls released out in North Carolina to indicate that, yeah, Roy Cooper's the favorite, but if you're the Democrat Party, this might be a bit concerning. Now, right now, Quantus Insight's a very good pollster, one of the best out there. They have Roy Cooper winning by just under 5 points. Which, yeah, that's a good showing. In that scenario, yeah, if he wins by 5 or 6 points or whatever, I would argue that's a very good night for Cooper in North Carolina, and more than likely indicates, yeah, Republican or Democrats are having a good night up and down the ballot across the board. But really, the more you look at these polls, and I know this may sound crazy, but the more you look at them, the more it seems like there are some big warning signs for the Democrat Party. And I know that sounds crazy. And let me be clear, I'm not saying that Democrats are going to lose North Carolina. I think they're going to win right now. And I'm not saying that Cooper winning right now by 5 points or whatever is a bad thing for him. It's not. But at the same time, when you add further context, you begin to realize that it may not be all perfect for Democrats. And in fact, there are some glaring warning signs here. For starters, Look at Roy Cooper's vote share. Yeah, he's up by 5 points, but look at the percent of the vote he's getting, 48.6%. And you can look at other pollsters, and they're showing a very similar thing. Outside of Change Research, a Democrat leaning pollster, look at this 49, 49, 47, 50, go down even further 48, 47, 47, 46, consistently below 50%. That's a big deal because if Roy Cooper was at like 55% of the vote and he's up by 10 points or whatever, yeah, he's going to probably win by a big margin because at that point, there's not a lot of undecided voters. Roy Cooper's clearly running up with all these voters, but that's not what's happening right now. Yeah, he's leading, but he's not getting 55% of the vote. He's not even cracking 50. One poll had him at probably 51% or not even 51, 50% of the vote in Change Research. That's it. That's a big deal because Roy Cooper right now has much more name recognition than Michael Whatley. And you would expect him to have a big lead right now and easily cracking 50% since he's an electoral juggernaut. He's a longtime popular governor and attorney general in North Carolina. That's what you would think. But in reality, no. Roy Cooper is stuck at like 49% of the vote. And that's not good for him because guess what? If you're not cracking 50% of the vote and there's a large undecided vote still outstanding, Whatley still has a chance in that scenario. I'm not saying he's going to win every single one of these voters, but guys, as Qantas Insights poll, for example, the remaining undecided voters are predominantly conservatives, Republican voters, Republican-leaning independents. These are voters that are going to break for Whatley by a big margin, and that's the issue. If Roy Cooper's up by 5 points and 6% of voters are undecided and they're basically all Whatley voters, or they should be, do the math. Again, this does not mean that Whatley's going to for sure win, but it adds further context and you realize, yeah, these polls, they're good for Cooper, but if these undecided voters, if they vote, these are predominantly Whatley voters, at least on paper at least. These are Republicans, conservative voters, etc. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And Roy Cooper is not cracking 50% consistently. Again, that's also important. So with that in mind, Roy Cooper, he's favored, but is there really this overwhelming 99.9% chance he's going to win? No. I would argue, yeah, he's the probably a clear favorite, but you should not count Whatley out of this at all because he is still in a position to win. He still right now has low name recognition, and Roy Cooper, despite this, is not cracking 50%. He's a former governor, not from 30 years ago, from 3 years ago, not even. And he's barely cracking 50%. Really? And on top of this is already kind of bad for Cooper when you factor in, yeah, these voters are Republicans, they're conservatives. You're not cracking 50% despite the fact that you're a longtime governor and AG. Not only that, but may I remind everybody that North Carolina polling is notoriously awful, especially early on in the cycle. For whatever reason, North Carolina polling in general sucks, but especially early on in the election. A good example, 2020 North Carolina Senate race. Tom Tillis was losing to Cunningham by 3 in the final week. Even with the scandal that Cunningham had, he was still ahead by 3 points. Tillis won by 2. But ignore this for a second. Look at this. Cunningham was consistently pulling above Tillis by a big margin. Look, as late as July, he was up by 9.5% for a day. It was like, yeah, 10%. And as late as October, he was up by almost 6 points. That is an 8-point miss. And was consistent throughout the entire cycle. But the important thing, Cunningham was not consistently cracking 50. Yes, once in a while, he was at 50, 51. But the vast majority of these polls had Cunningham below 50. about the 2020 North Carolina governor when Roy Cooper ran as the incumbent against Dan Forest, who was, relatively speaking, a semi-popular lieutenant governor. Was he the greatest candidate in the world? Not really, but the point is, it's not like he's Mark Robinson or whatever, okay? Well, Roy Cooper won by 4. The final week of polling averaged out to Cooper plus 11. Yeah, an 11-point miss. And you look even further into it, it was even worse. In May of 2020, Cooper was up by 18 points. Yeah, June of 2020, up by 16. In October, plus 11, plus 11, plus 12. So, Roy Cooper was expected to win by a big margin. He still won by a decent sized margin, but he underperformed significantly, especially compared to some polls. Like, look at this: NBC News plus 19, New York Times plus 14. We're not talking about some tiny 2-point misses. We're talking about a 10-point miss. We're talking about a 15-point miss. That is bad. And it's not just one poll, it was consistent. Every poll dramatically overstated Cooper's support by a big margin. Hell, back in 2016, the same thing happened. Yeah, on paper, it doesn't look so bad. Cooper plus 2. The final was Cooper plus 0.2. It was a very close race. He barely won. He still underperformed, but yet again, for the entire cycle, he was up. And in September and August, he was up by 5 points, 6 points in early September. Even in the middle of October, he was up by 4, 4.5, 5. Consistently, Roy Cooper underperforms his polling. Now, do you see the problem here? I'm not saying Roy Cooper's going to lose by 10 points or whatever. I think right now he is a favorite. But there should be some concern for Democrats that, hey, he's barely cracking 50. No, he's not even cracking 50. And Michael Whatley, still relatively speaking, has no name recognition. He's still a chance at this. He still has a chance to win because these undecided voters, they lean towards Whatley. These are Republicans. These are conservative voters. And Roy Cooper is just not cracking 50% for whatever reason. That's a big deal. That is a significant deal that he is not cracking 50. I have no clue how much of a victory Cooper's going to have. And Whatley could still win. But guys, if Democrats are going to barely win North Carolina, which they could still win it by a big margin, if they win it by a big margin, then yeah, they're probably having a good night. But if they're barely winning North Carolina despite everything theoretically favoring them by a wide margin, if they win it by 2 points or even by 3, is that really a great night for them? Theoretically, North Carolina should be the biggest win of all the swing states by a significant margin. Outside of like maybe Georgia or whatever, if they're having issues in North Carolina to crack 50%, what do you think's going on in Ohio? Do you think Brown's going to win Ohio? If Roy Cooper can't win North Carolina by a big margin, you think Brown's going to win Ohio? He still could, but that's the issue here. Roy Cooper should be winning by a bigger margin. I can't believe I'm saying that, but he should be. Or at the bare minimum, pulling at like 55%. He's not. He's pulling at 48, 49%, maybe in a best case scenario, 50. He's kind of just stuck there. He is stuck at 48% in the vast majority of the polls. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.